For the latest in strategic affairs, subscribe to our YouTube channel. Click the bell icon for updates.
This is StratNews Global. I'm Amitabh. Revi. On the gist today, we are looking at former Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe's state funeral and Prime Minister Modi and other world leaders attending it with Professor Yoichiro Sato. Glad to be joined on this live stream direct from Japan by Professor Yoichiro Sato. Professor Sato, thank you so much for coming to us live so late in the night for you.
Thank you. Good evening.
Good evening. Professor Sato, the state funeral, while the ceremonies were, of course, understandably deep in tribute, in honor and emotion as well, this is the first state funeral for a former prime minister in 55 years, but it was controversial. There were protests as well about the longest serving Prime Minister Shinzo Abe. Explain to us and our viewers, Professor Sato, why it was controversial and how widespread this sentiment is.
Yes. When the polls were taken, the over majority of the population had expressed their opposition to the state sponsoring of the funeral. And this has a lot to do with the former Prime Minister Abe's close ties with religious organizations. And of course, as you might have seen in recent reporting, the Abe's killer had the grudge about the Korean Unification Church, which was coming into Japan during the period of Abe's grandfather's premiership back in the 1960. But this is not the only religious issue surrounding Abe. Abe has known to be very close with kind of Shinto-based the conservative right-wing groupings, and Abe made a visit to the Yasukuni Shrine during the very beginning of the second term as the prime minister. And so with all those, the issue of the constitutionality of the state relationship with particular religious organizations has always surrounded Abe's premiership. So in a sense, the opposition is not only the leftist liberals, but also those ideological right who are having problem with the recent relationship with Korea. They were also part of the noise surrounding this the ongoing state funeral issue.
So how widespread is that sentiment? There were some reports suggesting that Prime Minister Kishida had a disapproval rating, or at least in terms of the state funeral, people didn't want the state funeral 60 to 70%. Is that credible?
Yeah, I think the polls are quite accurate, but what it doesn't measure is intensity of the opposition. And my sense is that the issue is not gonna last forever and keep fueling the opposition parties. I think opposition parties will soon have to decide to shift the focus onto some other issues. But having said that, I think this issue of the former Prime Minister Abe's legacy and how it helps or hurt the ruling Liberal Democratic Party is going to linger because Abe's leaving some of the really problematic issues behind, and one of them is the corruption surrounding the land transfer for private schools, which Abe allegedly got himself and his spouse involved.
Sure, I'm just going to ask you about Abe-san's legacy, but if I can just shift it from away from domestic to foreign and security policy.
Sure.
He was, of course, the one who initiated the Indo-Pacific concept way back in 2007 with his Confluence of Two Seas speech to India's parliament. And
Right.
considering how Xi Jinping's China is now behaving, it was way ahead of his time. So in that sense, how do you see Abe-san's legacy?
Oh yes, I mean Abe was heavily instrumental in the freedom of free and open Indo-Pacific concept and the quadrilateral, the diplomatic summit, and India-Japan relations. Of course, Abe Modi personalized, very close relationship was a booster to this bilateral relationship, and I think the people do approve the Abe's foreign policy by large, but as I said earlier, the domestic issues actually is a stain on Abe's foreign policy accomplishments.
How much, Professor Sato, is Japan willing to change in the face of the China threat? Both former Prime Minister Abe and, of course, Prime Minister Kishida now of late has been talking about counter-strike capability, about the defense budget set to go to historic levels.
Kishida's rhetorically succeeding Abe's foreign policy, the freedom of Indo-Pacific, free and open Indo-Pacific, and the other quadrilateral, and he, however, doesn't have the equivalently strong leadership within the party and over the coalition partners. So we already see signs that Kishida is trying to be a minimalist in terms of substance of Japan's contributions and try to mask the limited contribution with the rhetorics as well as some changes in accounting method, like NATO's talking about 2% of GDP as the common responsibility for its member countries, and Kishida in the meeting with Biden, basically said that Japan will significantly increase the budget for defense. But now Kishida's government is talking about changing the accounting of defense budget to increase the Coast Guard budget under the defense category, and things like that will actually raise the percentage in terms of appearance without actually changing the absolute amount.
Interesting. Abe-san, of course, considered India a key partner in the current geopolitical flux. Will his successors, including Prime Minister Kishida, accelerate these middle powers like India and Japan coming together, especially to deal with the China threat? And how is the Quad viewed in Japan, Professor Sato?
Well, I think Quad, again, is receiving a general support from the majority of the population. But I think the expectation about the Quad evolutions depends on who you are talking to. And the foreign ministry basically wants to be in charge of the Quad relationship, whereas the defense ministry and the branches of the self-defense forces wants to use the Quad platform for enhancing various bilateral, trilateral military partnerships. So the two ministries are not exactly talking about the same thing. And now Quad, comes with some expanded partnerships incorporating or trying to incorporate ASEAN members and moving into economic security domain and the Indo-Pacific economic partnership. And that will start involving economic ministries. But interestingly, the India is not fully, subscribing to the economic part of the relationship. So that would make it more difficult for this framework to be fully comprehensive.
I think you're referring to India not signing on to the IPEF, the
IPEF,
trade,
yes.
the trade part of the Quad. But again, Professor Sato, Prime Minister Modi and Prime Minister Abe had a personal connect, like Abe-san had with the former Prime Minister Manmohan Singh as well. How important is that understanding among leaders in taking relations to new levels? For Prime Minister Kishida, they had, I think, about a 25-minute meeting just before the state funeral.
Right. Yeah. I mean, Kishida will try to, kind of replicate, the Abe's the personalized leadership relationship. But the bigger challenge for Kishida is how long can he stay at the current position. And if he cannot survive this domestic politics, he's not going to have a chance to be a, statesman that Abe was.
In terms of you were mentioning economics, India hasn't signed on to the Quad leg in terms of IPEF, but in terms of the security, not in Quad, but India, Japan, the military domain, we have ACTA, which is the military logistics agreement.
Right.
You have naval exercises. There are plans for Air Force exercises where Sukhois apparently will take part. Now, that could be a crucial learning experience for Japan, considering that China also uses the same aircraft.
Sure. Yeah. I think India-Japan naval cooperation will advance in terms of capacity building. And, but, for other things like the military sales of equipment, we've been talking about the sales of U-2 rescue plane from Japan to India, but it's been taking so many years, and Russia continues to be an important supplier for India's defense, and there are some structural factors which continues the status quo of India's various relationship, and bilateral relationship with Japan can grow only within that limited context.
We saw what happened post Speaker Nancy Pelosi's visit to Taiwan and China's war game exercises, missiles being fired into Japan's EEZ, a war of words between the two sides. But among the Japanese population at large, what is the sentiment about China?
Well, I think the perception about the threat from China is definitely on the rise, and the China's the provocative activities around the Taiwan Straits has elevated perception that Taiwan crisis, Taiwan contingency is also a contingency for Japan. And this is very important because, for Japan to declare fuller collective defense with the United States, the Taiwan's crisis must be regarded as directly threatening Japan's security. So the public perceptions moving into that directions actually gives a boost to Japan's pursuit of closer collective security with the United States and other partners. And in the case of contingency, Australia will have important role in this in East Asia. But the India's role in the Taiwan Strait contingency is still something beyond speculation, and we really don't know what India intends to do if the war breaks out over the Taiwan Straits.
That's true. Again, going back to Abe-san's legacy, Professor Sato, he was one of those who started or tried to start a debate within Japan about nuclear weapons umbrella. How do you see that debate moving in Japan, especially when you consider Prime Minister Kishida, his constituency, of course, is Hiroshima?
Right. Yeah, I mean, Kishida has a very personal stake on the nuclear disarmament issue, but at the same time, Japan is facing a growing missile and nuclear threats combined, and it's not only about China but North Korea as well. And Japan has trying to focus on the missile defense, shooting down the ballistic missiles, but that discussion has moved into the domain of counter-strike capability against the missile bases and its supportive infrastructures in the hostile states. So in that context, I think the U.S. Now it's out of the INF, the Intermediate Nuclear Forces Treaty with Russia, and the possibility of redeveloping and even redeploying intermediate the missiles is a real possibility. It doesn't have to be nuclear tipped, but the intermediate missiles to counter the growing missile threat from mainland China is a definite possibility. But the question is where to deploy them in Asia. And, it's going to be very difficult for the Japanese population to accept the U.S. the ballistic missiles onto its soil.
You mentioned Russia earlier, Professor Sato. Now, what about ties with Russia? I mean, apart from Ukraine, where Japan has been extremely strong, like the US, even on sanctions, India has made its policies clear. Something I think Japan probably understands but is not happy with when it comes to Ukraine. Russia relations slipping even further after what happened, the incident that happened with your diplomat in Vladivostok.
Yes, yeah. The spying allegation against the Japanese diplomat by Russia is currently putting the relationship on the ice. But at the same time, Japan still remains an investor to the Sakhalin gas project. So and Japan is not considering completely withdrawing from that project at the moment. So it's very important for Japan to utilize energy sources from Russia for the purpose of diversifying supply away from the Middle East. So Japan, it's not in Japan's interest to completely cut off ties with Russia. And India also imports Russian resources, and it's not just arms trade. And in Japan, India, in that sense, share the same interest in trying to find a kind of middle ground and maintain at least the dialogue channel with Russia.
So to sum up, Professor Sato, what you're saying, would it be correct to interpret what you're saying like this, that Prime Minister Kishida's domestic standing is suspect at the moment in terms of his
Right.
strength, and where that will take him and his policies will be more dependent on how he can handle the domestic issues rather than foreign policy?
Yeah, I think it will depend on his handling of the domestic politics. And if nothing happens, the current parliament has 1 more year until it completes the term. So the question is how long Kishida can survive before that term. And I think this autumn, the parliamentary sessions is going to be very critical for Kishida. If Kishida cannot defend the LDP's policy, and some of that relates to Abe's legacy issues, if Kishida doesn't handle them well and opposition parties win the debate, then Kishida may be forced into stepping down.
Wow. Professor Sato, absolutely appreciate you explaining the situation both domestically and in terms of foreign policy currently in Japan, and absolutely appreciate you staying so late past your bedtime. It's almost
No
11:30,
problem.
I think, there. Thanks again, Professor Sato.
Thank you very much for inviting me.
Pleasure's always ours on StratNews Global. And just a reminder to our viewers to subscribe to our YouTube channel if you haven't already, and social media handles. If you subscribe to our Telegram channel, you'll get updates as soon as we put up new articles on our website or videos like this on YouTube. You can also help support us. There's a UPI QR code that will flash on your screen, as well as a link in the YouTube descriptor. This is The Gist on StratNews Global. I'm Amitabh Revi.